Starting over at 60 was the best decision she made. She had a pension, a paid-off house, 3 grown children, and a calendar full of nothing. At 60, most people call that success. She called it a slow death. So Margaret Doyle did what no one in her life expected, what every financial advisor warned against, and what every well-meaning friend called reckless. She sold everything, bought a broken-down farm in Portugal, alone. And in doing so, she didn't just restart her life, she built something the world had never seen. This is her story, every word of it true. For 35 years, Margaret Doyle was a school principal in Cincinnati, Ohio. She raised 3 children, buried a husband at 57, and retired at 59 with every box society told her to check. But 6 months into retirement, something no one warned her about crept in. Not loneliness, not grief, something quieter and more dangerous. I would go entire days without anyone needing me for anything, and I realized my entire identity had been built around being needed. Take that away and you start asking a very uncomfortable question. Who am I now? Then, one morning, clearing out an old box of her late husband's belongings, she found a photograph, a crumbling farmhouse, olive trees, golden Portuguese light, their honeymoon, 1987. I sat on the floor and stared at that photo for a long time, and something in me just said, go back. The property was still listed, a 5-acre olive farm in the Alentejo region of southern Portugal, crumbling, overgrown, and on the market for $180,000. Margaret had $340,000 in savings, a paid-off house, and zero knowledge of farming, Portuguese, or what she was doing. She called a family meeting. My son David said, "Mom, you don't even speak Portuguese." My daughter said, "What about the grandkids?" My financial advisor sent me a 4-page document about liquidity risks in retirement. Even my doctor mentioned my knees. Everyone had a reason, and they weren't wrong. But I kept thinking, what's the alternative? Sit and wait? What Margaret was feeling had a scientific foundation she wouldn't discover until later. Researchers at Stanford's Center on Longevity have found that people who pursue new identity-forming challenges after 60, learning new skills, entering unfamiliar environments, building something from scratch, show measurably better cognitive and physical health outcomes than those who settle into passive retirement. The brain, it turns out, doesn't want comfort. It wants problems to solve. Margaret sold the Ohio house in March, liquidated a portion of her investments, bought the farm in April. On a Tuesday in early May, she boarded a one-way flight to Lisbon. I cried for the first 2 hours of that flight, and then somewhere over the Atlantic, I stopped, and I thought, I am the most terrified I have ever been, and also the most awake. The farm was worse than the listing photos suggested. The olive trees hadn't been properly pruned in over a decade. The farmhouse roof had partially collapsed. The irrigation system was non-functional, and Margaret's Portuguese extended to obrigada and bom dia. Her closest neighbor was 3 miles away. His name was João. He was 71, a retired carpenter, and he spoke no English whatsoever. They communicated for the first 3 weeks entirely through hand gestures, a Portuguese-English dictionary, and what Margaret describes as a tremendous amount of mutual goodwill. João became everything in that first year. My translator, my teacher, my construction crew. He would show me how to do something, prune an olive branch, mix cement, test soil pH, and then stand back and watch me do it wrong, and then very patiently show me again. The physical reality of the work was something no book had prepared her for. Blisters in the first week, sunstroke in the second month, a fractured wrist in month 4 when a stone wall she was rebuilding shifted unexpectedly. She considered going home exactly once. Night 47, alone in the farmhouse, rain coming through the partially repaired roof. She recorded a voice note to herself. It's 11 p.m. and I'm sitting under a tarp inside my own house, and I genuinely think I have made a catastrophic mistake. I miss my grandchildren. I miss being competent. But I'm going to sleep now, and tomorrow I'm going to finish that wall. She finished the wall. And 4 months later, in late October, she harvested her first crop of olives by hand, with João, 2 local teenagers he recruited, and a rented press. 200 liters of olive oil. I held that first bottle and I just wept. Not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because I made it, with my hands. At 61 years old, on land I had no business owning. That was the moment I knew I wasn't leaving. By the end of year 2, the farm was operational, the farmhouse was restored, the olive trees were producing, and Margaret, fluent enough in Portuguese to argue with her local supplier about pricing, had a new idea. She had been writing letters home to friends, mostly women her age, describing what the work was doing to her, not just physically, psychologically. Her friends wrote back with variations of the same sentence. I want that. The way learning a completely new skill at 61 rewired something fundamental. The way physical labor quieted anxiety she had carried for decades. The way being a beginner again, truly, humbly, incompetently beginning, restored something she thought age had taken from her. So she built it for them. She named the farm Quinta da Recomeço, in Portuguese, the farm of the new beginning, and she designed what she called later life learning retreats, 1-week immersive stays for women over 55. The first retreat hosted 6 women, word of mouth only. Within 14 months, there were 47 women on the waiting list from 11 countries. Margaret partnered with a gerontologist at the University of Lisbon to document what was happening to participants. The preliminary findings were striking. 94% of participants reported a significant increase in life purpose scores after just 1 week on the farm. The olive oil brand, also called Recomeço, was accepted into a Lisbon organic food cooperative in year 3. Margaret Doyle was now running an internationally recognized enterprise in southern Portugal at 63. But this is not a story without cost, and Margaret is precise about that. I missed my granddaughter's first steps. I missed Thanksgiving for 3 years. I have a book club in Cincinnati that met every third Thursday for 22 years, and I'm not in it anymore. She also lost João. He passed away in the winter of year 3, a heart attack, sudden and without warning. Margaret spoke at his funeral in Portuguese. Losing João was like losing my husband a second time. He taught me that you can build a profound friendship without a shared language. What you need is shared work and shared respect. But set against those losses, she counts what she found with equal precision: a second language, a body that is physically stronger at 63 than it was at 55, a community of women across 3 continents who have become her closest friends, and something harder to name, a settled confidence that she describes as the absence of the question she used to carry every day. I know what I'm doing, and I know why. At 63, for the first time in my life, honestly, Margaret Doyle now speaks at retirement and longevity conferences across Europe and the United States. Her message is not that everyone should buy a farm in Portugal. It's sharper than that. Retirement was designed in the 1930s for people who were physically exhausted by industrial labor and expected to live another 8 years. That is not us. We are healthy, educated, experienced, and we could have 30 years ahead of us. What are we going to do with that? Margaret calls it the third act. And every Sunday evening, when a new group of women arrives, tired, uncertain, slightly terrified, she meets them in the courtyard and says the same thing. You are not here because your life is over. You are here because your first draft is finished. Last summer, David, the son who warned her about Portuguese and liquidity, visited the farm. He stayed 3 weeks. He helped rebuild a stone wall on the eastern edge of the property. On the last night before he flew home, he turned to his mother. He said, "Mom, I've never seen you like this." And I asked what he meant. He said, "Alive." Margaret Doyle is 64. The farm has hosted over 200 women from 19 countries. She wakes up before sunrise every morning, makes 1 cup of coffee, walks out into the olive grove alone, and she is not waiting for anything. The question was never whether she was too old to start over. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out who she'd become when she did. She was.